Hello, and welcome to this episode of Man Alive. I'm your host, Shayna James, and I'm here today to talk about something that I think every man I've ever talked to and worked with struggles with, and something that when you learn how to overcome the struggle creates incredible relief and incredible pleasure. And so the topic is performance anxiety. And really today we're going to talk about normalizing it, how to work with it, what's possible instead, so that you can have an incredible love and sex life. And I'm here today with Alex Grendi. Alex, welcome. Thank you for being here and for making this your work in the world to support men with this.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. And I'm obviously deeply connected to it, having experienced performance anxiety for 15 years plus of my life. So, yeah, there's a big reason why this is my passion because overcoming that was the biggest change and like life-changing moment I've had.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? Like what happened in that shift from having performance anxiety to learning how to navigate it?
Yeah, I mean, the feeling when I was having performance anxiety was just not feeling good enough, avoiding women, avoiding sex and intimacy, avoiding women that I truly desired, because I didn't feel good enough for them. So, depending on kind of the time, I would either be avoiding women or being with women who I didn't really truly want to be with. And it left me having a lot of disconnected experiences. Ways that I would cope with the performance anxiety would be drinking or using marijuana to just kind of disconnect and be able to go up into my head instead of being with my partner
Right.
or with
And then you could
myself.
kind of go through the motions, but you weren't really there in the same way, it sounds like.
Exactly. I mean, for me, most of those moments were going to fantasy. So even further removed from being in the room, I was like, how do I ejaculate? How do I get to performing during sex? How do I stay hard? Okay, I need to
I need to
go to
do
what
stuff.
I
I need to
know.
do this. I need to, right, make it happen,
Yeah,
it sounds like.
I have to make this work because there's just so much pressure on me to
Yeah.
make sure my girlfriend at the time wasn't upset or that she didn't feel attractive if I wouldn't get hard or didn't ejaculate.
Yep.
So it was like even sometimes before I would have a sexual encounter, I would watch porn before a woman came over to have like fresh material ready to perform.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Then that brings that energy to the surface for you, and in case it doesn't show
Yeah,
up in that
exactly.
moment. Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't have to rely on being there,
Yeah.
and being present. It was just like, ooh, I know a kind of like a quick fix.
Yes.
I know something that works for me,
Yep.
and it's way less risk than, any other way that I knew.
Yeah, totally. Okay. So something happened, and at some point you realized like this isn't working, too much pressure, not enough
Hmm.
intimacy connection, right? Like what broke the the moment or the habit?
Yeah, there was a lot. And one of the biggest moments was, I started to learn very well, actually, it kind of happened where my life just fell apart, essentially. There was a breakdown and I needed to reevaluate myself and really pick myself up.
Yeah.
And that led to a lot of self-help books and a lot of looking into different ways that I could come back to myself, whether it was through yoga, meditation. And then I started to learn things like Taoism and Tantra and became a lot more interested in like, oh, this is something that I could improve. And there's ways
And then
to
you have a little
connect
more
to my
control
energy.
over it too, instead of just like being at the whim of whatever's happening in the moment.
Exactly. And that there was a way to experience more pleasure.
Yeah.
So I started going down that rabbit hole and I thought, wow, this is really interesting. I started trying a lot of these techniques myself, but with very little success.
Uh-huh.
So I had these concepts of semen retention and, how to have a non-ejaculatory orgasm, but no training.
Yeah.
So, reading it in a book and then trying it is like, I have no idea if I'm doing this right. And
Yeah.
it actually led to a lot of discomfort, blue balls, and just like pain,
Pain.
essentially,
Like,
Yeah.
which is great. It's like, the defeating the purpose, right? You're trying to get to more pleasure and then it's more painful.
Totally,
Yeah.
but you don't know what you don't know. And I just had the information from the books. And then it wasn't actually until a friend of mine had mentioned that he was working with a sex coach that I was like, what in the world is that? Like I need
Hold
to
the
know
phone.
about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had never heard of what that was. And I just said, send me his contact, spoke to him, realized that there was support for this.
Great.
So I did my research. I found a couple other coaches because I wanted to know it all. I
Yeah.
was like, I am fully committed. This is something I am definitely going all in on.
Awesome.
So I worked with three different coaches with three totally different approaches.
Okay.
One man who's like very embodied, very masculine. One man who had a very like scientific, biological approach, and then a female who taught me about female pleasure.
That's
So
so okay. I'm just loving the three different approaches and how no one's right, no one's wrong. And there's just
yeah,
different doorways into this, into more freedom, into more choice. And that's so great. Um,
yeah,
can you say a little bit more when you think about performance anxiety? Like you and I both know, having worked with, thousands of men, that it's very common. And a lot of men, I think, in the bedroom especially, think, oh God, I'm the only one. This is worse for me than it is for others. And there's this shame about
mhm.
talking about it and asking questions. And so I don't know. I'm actually even wondering if you can describe a little bit performance anxiety, like how it shows up and all the things that men might be experiencing that they're not alone in.
Yeah, thank you. And for me, the way performance anxiety comes up, and for so many men that I work with, it's like a lot of them do fine in speaking with women, maybe hitting on women and meeting new women. But then once there's a shift and it's leaning towards physical,
Mhm.
that's when the fear and
That's where the
anxiety
pressure
comes
and
in,
anxiety comes. Yeah.
where it starts, whether it's like after dinner, okay, like what happens next? Are we going back to my place? That's when the fear really creeps in and you start to have these questions. Well, you know, am I going to last long enough?
Mhm.
Am I big enough? What is she going to tell her friends about me?
Yeah.
And once these types of questions start filling your head, it's almost going to be impossible for you to fully relax and be able to be in pleasure.
Yeah. I
And
mean,
it's extremely common.
yeah. And part of what I know too is that there are so many different kinds of pleasure, right? There's physical pleasure, there's our energetic body, there's kind of the, emotional aspect, there's like there's so many different kinds of pleasure. And usually the men who I know who or talk to who have performance anxiety don't know that there are all these different aspects of pleasure, right? That there can be whole body orgasms and that there can be, orgasms without ejaculation. So it's almost like, and I wrote about this in my book, Honest Sex, where it's like the definition of sex is so narrow or so limited. I think that creates even more pressure.
Yeah, if all they know about pleasure is ejaculation, then their pleasure experience is going to be extremely limited.
Yeah.
And if you're in fear and anxiety, you can't feel pleasure.
No.
So that, a lot of men that I work with, they realize really soon, like they're completely disconnected from their bodies and
Yeah.
pleasure.
It reminds me of, I went to an arcade recently with my kid, and that one where you just try to throw the ball into the Coke bottles or whatever, and it's like fucking nearly impossible, right? And it just becomes this
Yeah.
stressful thing. It's like if you're just going for that one shot, it's so
Mm,
stressful versus enjoying the moment.
Yeah, if you're just throwing up kind of like a Hail Mary for fun, it's like, oh, whatever happens, happens. And this is the type of mentality that I try to instill in men because when it comes to premature ejaculation, erectile dysfunction, they're trying to will and like force their penis to perform in a certain way.
Yeah.
You can't just demand your
Top
penis
down.
to get hard
Yeah.
because you want to.
Well, especially if
You
you're trying
actually,
to demand, then you're not, right? You're not in your body feeling those sensations.
yeah,
So
you're
what,
not allowing it to happen.
yeah, okay. So how do you support men to allow rather than to try to force or to think it or will it to happen?
Well, the first is to change that mentality,
Mhm.
and to understand that you actually can't control pleasure. It's the one thing that you have to let go. And for
Interesting.
men, that's a really difficult thing to hear
Yeah.
because very rational minded, like we want to just perform and have an objective and do the thing. And this is something that they're not really able to do that. And they have to be able to just surrender and say, whatever happens, happens. Whatever my body wants to do right now is what's right.
It's a big
But
letting
the
go.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And what that means is understanding that you don't have control of the situation,
Mhm.
that there are unknowns, and that that's okay.
Yeah.
But being able to do that, you need to know how to connect to your body. You
Mhm.
need to be able to de-stress. You need to be able to, when you are feeling some sort of fear or anxiety, to connect back to your breath and get into your body.
Yeah.
So that's a huge part of that's kind of like level one is understanding how stressed are you in your daily life?
Mhm.
How much pressure are you putting on yourself in general? And being able to slowly let go of that as well,
Yeah.
right? Because it's not just, oh, I'm only like this in the bedroom. It's like, no,
Exactly.
you're
Right. It's
like
like
this in
the
everything.
microcosm. Yeah, you get to, that's what I love about working with men around sex, but it's, I do not the physical aspect of sex, all the emotional and communication and connection, right? But it's like such a microcosm of what happens everywhere in their lives. So you get to see very concretely in the bedroom how you're relating to life in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, and most men I talk to also, it's really hard for them to admit to a partner,
Mhm.
right? Oh, this is a place where I'm not as much in control, or where I can't just make my body do a thing, especially because, like you said, in your experience, you didn't want your girlfriend to think it was about her or you weren't attracted, or
Mhm.
right, that's a muddy place.
Yeah, 100%. And it's something that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Yeah, that's such an important point. And it's something that I encourage men to do in literally like step one, once they join my program, is to be able to communicate with their partner and speak their truth about what's going on. Because if you hold on to all of that shame and guilt, it's just going to create more tension in the body, more stress, and compound this pressure. So what I see is even that one conversation of just being like, okay, here's the truth, and also I encourage them to say it in a way that doesn't make them feel small or bad, and actually say
It's not an apology.
confidently,
Um,
yeah, no, confidently, like, hey, I haven't been showing up in the best way. I've been putting a lot of pressure on myself. I haven't been performing and pleasuring you the way that you deserve. And by the way, I've committed to making a change for this,
mhm.
whereas now it's like it's a power of like, oh wow, he's really committed to doing this. He's, seeking help. And that I think can be this like huge weight off the shoulders. And now all of a sudden your partner's excited and they're supporting you in this process. So something that could be your biggest fear of, if I tell her this, she's gonna leave,
Yeah.
could be the catalyst of actually bringing you closer
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, it's not like this ho-hum, like, ugh, there's something wrong with me and I'm spiraling downward into shame. And, it's like, oh, okay, I can actually know that I'm a good person and that I'm working on this, and that, right, I think that can build the confidence, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I think
The
more often than
intimacy.
not, women can empathize with this and say, "Hey, I've had performance issues. I've struggled to have orgasms sometimes. I've been stuck in my head."
Yeah.
Where you can kind of come together on a common ground. Where again, most men think they're the only one,
Yeah.
when of course their partner has experienced it as well
Yeah.
at
Yeah, and I
some
find
point.
that too. Like that's, I think my favorite part is that intimacy that happens when people allow themselves to be human and, not have to be perfect and not have to have it all together. And we can actually admit this and be on the same team. And,
Hmm.
that's where that intimacy and safety gets built. So I think we were talking about step number one, right? That first of all, actually acknowledging, right? I'm not the only one having that conversation. Where do you go from there with men?
Yeah, I think that's, a great starting point. You can release some of that pressure and just like get the secret out of the open and just be like, yeah, I've been struggling with this. And then
Right.
step two would be really letting go of that pressure.
Mm.
So what I described before is having this way of whenever you're starting to feel fear or anxiety, that you have a tool to reconnect to your body instead of making
Love that.
these decisions out of fear, out of urgency, in this like sympathetic nervous system state. You can think, fully connect, and then act from a place of actual like relaxation.
Okay,
And
so for
and
those who are listening and not watching, what did you just do? Because they couldn't see.
yeah, so what I do is take a nice deep inhale through the nose into my belly, and
Mhm.
I could keep one hand on my heart, one hand on my belly, and just like feel my belly rise on the inhale,
Mhm.
and then just a nice deep exhale, and you'll feel the belly fall.
Nice.
And this is a way to just like you're feeling your heart, you're feeling your belly rise, you're connected to your body. There's nothing to do other than breathe. There's nothing to think about.
Nowhere to
And
get to.
this, exactly, this will take you out of your mind and back to your body. And, men who just kind of learn to connect to this for the first time realize I'm in a state of stress 90% of my day.
Right. Yeah.
And
And
that's
it's
a
so
shocking
amazing how
realization.
simple it can be. It's simple, but not easy, right? Because the habit is to keep revved up in that stress, and the simplicity of actually coming back to the breath and inviting a partner into that too. Like that is incredible. I love as a woman when, I'm invited into slowing down or breathing deeper or feeling more pleasure in my body, right? That it doesn't have to be this thing where you like, oh, sorry, I need to go do this, but hey, let's do this together. It can be beautiful.
Yeah, and part of what I teach and becoming kind of stepping into this best version of yourself as a man is taking responsibility for yourself first, but then being able to support your partner in doing it as well. So if you're grounded and you're attuned and you know how to connect back to your body, but your partner doesn't yet, you
Yeah,
have this opportunity to really ground them, make them feel safe, and share the teachings of, I know you're worked up, but like let's just breathe, let's just, slow down. So being able to share that with a partner, I think is beautiful.
I love that. Awesome. Okay. And what do they do next?
Um, So then the next step would be really learning your arousal. I'm specifically coaching men who have premature ejaculation and erectile dysfunction, but mostly premature ejaculation. So the next step after connecting to your breath would be then doing a practice to connect to your body, to really, like we said before, kind of gain this awareness that there is pleasure outside of our genitals. So we start to explore our bodies in new ways where we're connecting to our breath, we're not touching our genitals, and we're starting to experience pleasure.
Yes.
And this is
Whole
also a
body
way,
pleasure.
yeah, you start to explore everything. You start to explore with different, tools and types of touch, kind of figure out what you like and don't like, because men are so used to, oh, pleasure is genital touch.
Right.
That's it.
Genital only.
That's it. Yeah. So being able to kind of gain that awareness for the first time, it can be quite eye-opening. And, I teach them how to connect to another kind of breath that allows them to start to move that sexual energy.
Beautiful. And I was just thinking too that, to be multi-orgasmic, um, I imagine that you would work with men to feel, right, to feel their whole body, so that it's
Yeah,
not just a genital orgasm, but a full body orgasm.
exactly. So we have to learn how to move our arousal from our genitals up through our entire body.
Mm-hmm.
And we start to learn that when we're just exploring and mapping our bodies, but then it kind of moves to the next stage when we start to incorporate genital touch and then moving that arousal even more and exploring what it means to really build that sexual arousal in our genitals, but then feel it in other places.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Um,
More steps.
Yeah, well, and then there's just a little, so that kind of next step is just really getting familiar and knowing your arousal so well
Mhm.
that, okay, I know at this, let's just say, percentage of closeness to the point of no return or ejaculation, like this is where I feel comfortable.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna kind of hover around this area, because as soon as they go above that, it can feel like, oh no, kind of
I'm going to go over the
disaster.
edge. So the
Yeah,
hovering
really.
being like, all right, I'm going to move my body or not move my body or breathe or do all kinds of things to stay at this level of arousal.
Yes. So whether, once this incorporates into, intercourse or sexual activity with a partner, it's like you need to be able to know your body well enough to say, okay, slow down
Uh-huh.
or speed up or modulate your breath
Yeah.
in a way to slow yourself down or speed yourself up.
Mhm.
So that's kind of the dance. It's not just like, oh, I flipped the switch and I can just do whatever I want.
Uh-huh.
It's like, yeah, you also need to know your body. And if you're in a certain position going as fast as you can, that's not sustainable.
Yeah. It
You
just
need to
struck
be able
me.
to,
Yeah, it just struck me how like the similarity between emotional intelligence, right? Where it's like, okay, I can feel my emotions and I'm not necessarily overtaken by them and I don't explode with them. It's like, oh, I can witness them and I can kind of ride the waves and then I get to choose what I want to do with it. Similar to that, the sexual energy of, okay, I'm not just gonna blow it out. I'm gonna be conscious here in that choice.
100%. And, I can only speak to my own experience, but also what other men share with me in my program.
Yeah.
This desire to ejaculate never goes away, no
Mm,
matter what in a sexual interaction. This is an innate part of us that our body is saying, ooh, pleasure, stimulation, let's ejaculate.
uh-huh.
Ejaculation feels great,
Yes.
you know? So that is definitely hardwired, whether it's like evolutionarily, biologically, or if it's, more recent with porn and the way that we're taught about sex and ejaculation and pleasure, but it's there,
Okay, so how do you
you know?
navigate that? That it's there, but you're just choosing something different?
Yeah, so it's again for me, it's like when you know your arousal and you've set an intention,
Yeah.
right? So I practice semen retention and I try to go between 10 and 14 days between ejaculations.
Mhm.
So if I know I'm only on day 4 and I'm going to have a self-pleasure practice or I'm intimate with a woman, I'm going to set the intention not only for myself, but I will share that with a partner
Uh-huh. And that,
before we get physical.
what's it like for you to have orgasms without ejaculation? It sounds like it's still very pleasurable, maybe even more pleasurable.
Oh, yeah. It's extremely pleasurable. It's very different. I think it's difficult to compare them. Ejaculations are amazing, and I don't want to take anything away from them. Uh, but I think once you are able to experience full body orgasm, you realize they're pretty amazing too. And that spectrum is so vast where you could have something really subtle or you can have something really profound and different. I mean, I've had my arguably one of my most profound full body orgasms without an erection.
Wow, amazing.
Yeah, so it's kind of the thing that when you have an ejaculation, you know what you're going to get. There's a
Yep.
familiarity there. With non-ejaculatory pleasure, there's this full letting go, and you kind of don't know what you're going to get and
Mhm.
what you're going to experience.
Mhm.
So I think that's a really fun element to it, and there's no ceiling, there's no end.
Yeah, no end. Right. That's so cool. And then it's right. Then there's, I don't know, it's always fresh. It's always new. It's always something revealing itself as like, right. Instead of the rote, I know what's going to happen and, you know, what has been, it's like, oh, who knows what this is going to turn into, what this is going to feel like.
100%. And I think that's a really fun aspect of it. And it certainly takes all the pressure off. Like,
Yeah.
oh, it actually doesn't matter what happens.
Yes.
And I think an important thing to note is a lot of men assume that if you share with your partner that you're not going to be ejaculating, that that would be like a negative thing, or that they
Mhm.
would be like, what, why?
Mhm.
And sometimes they do say that, like, why? I want you to ejaculate. Like, there's some validation there. But once you kind of explain that, it's for your energy, but also you want to give your partner as much pleasure as possible, and that we can absorb some of their energy from when they're orgasming, they quickly change their tune and they're like, okay, this sounds fun.
Great. Great. I'll play with that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing this work. And of course, we could go much deeper into this, but for now, is there anything that you want to leave men with, or anything that feels possible that you think we haven't covered so they can understand it?
Yeah, I just think a really important message is that it's so common to have performance anxiety as a man. And it's not only so common, like from my perspective, it you should have it
Mm.
based on what we're being fed. It would be kind of weird if you didn't have performance anxiety.
Yeah.
So first of all, that it's so common, and second of all, that you can overcome it. There's so many different ways, so many different approaches that can allow you to fully break this cycle, be able to have amazing sex, amazing confidence, amazing relationships, if you commit yourself and if you have the courage to be able to make that call or reach out to someone for help. And that's the other thing, that it's okay to ask for help.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, I think there's this expectation that we're men and we have all the answers, we know everything. We don't.
No.
And
No, and nobody was
and
taught. I mean,
yes, that's
most
my
of us
last
were
thing,
not.
is
So we're kind of out here.
nobody
Yeah.
teaches us how to have sex. Nobody. And before I got coaching, I had so much sexual experience that I thought, okay, well, I've done everything. I've had threesomes, I've had this, so many partners. And as soon as I got coaching, I realized I actually knew nothing.
Mhm, mhm.
So if I was someone who had all of this experience and knew nothing, if someone has, very few partners, very few experience, it would be that much more, you know, obvious. And yeah, if and when you do take that step, um, to make a life change, to have a better sexual experience, I can tell you, I know it's scary, but it can be the most life-changing thing you could ever do.
Awesome. And where can men find more of you?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is on YouTube. You can just search for me at Alex Grendi, or you can check out my website, superiorlovers.com.
Awesome.
And if you watch my free training and feel called to learn more, you can book a call with me. It's a free call, and we can see if we would be a good fit to work together.
Awesome. Thank you so much for supporting men and for normalizing this and helping men see and experience all the things that are possible.
Yeah, thank you so much for the support and for helping spread this message. It's really important to me, and yeah, thank you for your work as well.
Yeah, you're welcome.